All right, this is the Growth Podcast. My name is Aaron Chiviterese, and I'm here today with my guest, Greg Spillane, the CEO of Fancy.com, whose early investors were some pretty famous names you might have heard of. Will Smith, Ashton Kutcher. Who else we got on the list here? Drake, Justin Bieber. If these types of guys are investing in your company, I want to talk to you about this because this is awesome, man. I'm excited for this. I'm pumped to get to know you here. Greg, welcome to the Growth Podcast, man.
Thanks, Aaron. Hey, man, it's great to be here.
Absolutely. So, Greg, tell us a little bit about yourself, man. You and I are just getting to know each other here, but, for the listeners who don't know you quite as well as I do, just tell us a little bit about yourself. Where you're from? How'd you come into this game?
Yeah, sure. So I'm a California guy. Grew up in Southern California, San Diego. Originally from New York, but basically grew up in the Southern California area. Blue collar family. Dad, self-employed, Army vet. Kind of a bootstrap guy, owned a bunch of small businesses growing up. Mom, stayed-home mom, but really kind of learned a lot of the values of like hard work. Just watching my dad work 6 days a week, 50, 60 hours a week, day in, day out. And big athletic guy. Grew up loving sports, played all the big sports, but it was kind of a little bit of that dichotomy because I was also a little bit of a nerd. So I got into computers really early on. Ended up actually getting a football scholarship. So I attended undergrad on an athletic scholarship, played football here at San Diego State. But it was right about when the internet was taking off. So, saw the potential and where the internet was going. And that really kind of led into my career. So I got done playing athletics. NFL dreams kind of died, and it was time to start my career. Started off as a developer, as an engineer, and quickly realized that sitting behind a computer and coding for 8 hours a day was not for me. So moved into the business side of it, founded an agency that converted ourselves really into more of a software company. We developed a couple different products that we took to market, built that up, had a chance to exit it out. And really since then, it's just been kind of an interesting evolution of spending some time in the enterprise, large Walmart kind of Target, working with these guys, do these like $100 million system integration projects, and then eventually brought me back into the startup world where I've been for the last 6 years.
Damn, that's a journey. That's a journey. Cool, man. Well, we got a lot in common. I also went on an undergrad scholarship for athletics and did the whole thing.
Oh, did you?
Yeah. Alpine ski racing, Right?
Awesome.
It's the same thing, like a lot of people were like, oh, you got a full ride scholarship in the States. Like, you've made it as an athlete and I would tell people, man, at least for ski racing, this is true. I know it's not for a lot of sports, but in ski racing, if you're taking a full ride scholarship, it means you're done. That's what it means.
Yeah.
Either you're on your way to World Cup and Olympics or you retire and you go to school,
Well, that's funny. Yeah.
Right. And I was like, no, it's not a good thing, but okay, I'll take it. But it was a good experience for sure. Loved it. We also 2-time national champs and it was awesome for sure. Let's talk about that just for a sec. Before we jump into business stuff. You learn a lot in sports. Hey, a lot. And so I found that ex-athletes or current athletes make amazing entrepreneurs and businessmen and women, of course. Talk to us a little bit about that. Like, what does athletics do for you in say a leadership capacity?
Yeah, no, a great question. And I couldn't agree with you more. I look back at my life and, when I'm asked that question of, hey, how did you get to where you got to and what was your journey? It's like all roads in some ways lead back to my athletic career. And some of the lessons I learned in sports, and I'm sure, you have the same situation or just things that have carried on. I mean, I think from the simple part of just the meritocracy nature of athletics, right? I mean, as a downhill skier, it's like, hey, are you faster than the guy next to you? Right? There's no question about it. There's no entitlement. It's not because you've known the coach longer or you deserve it or you think you deserve it. It's just, hey, what did you do on the field? And I think that ultimately that's the same thing with business, right? And I think I've tried to take that throughout my career. But then, outside of that, it's things like preparation, sort of the time and effort that's necessary. Like, you're not going to be successful at something just because you want it or you wish it. You're going to have to work for it. You're going to have to do those things and make those sacrifices on a day in and day out basis that are going to lead you there. Being coachable, even as a CEO of a company, like I have to open myself up for critique, right? And you can never be afraid to be able to take coaching. And I think that that's something you see in sports all the time, right? Like Tom Brady, arguably the greatest quarterback in the world, every Monday morning he probably sat in a room and had, his coaches tell him all the things that he did wrong, right? And the second you close yourself off to coaching, you stop improving. And those are all things that I'm sure you learned in athletics. I learned in athletics, but I take them with me. Number one, just to help improve myself, but number two, I think those are the type of qualities I try to build within my team.
Yeah, absolutely. Could not agree more with any of that. That's awesome. A funny thing relating to my athletics was alpine ski racing, right? So like you spend all summer doing dry land, we'd call it, which is like, plyometrics, running, jumping, leg weights, sit-ups, core, yoga, doing all this stuff to get ready. Go down to South America and train, go over to Europe and train, fly around the world chasing the snow, all for a 2-minute run.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like, now's the moment. It's all on the line. It's 2 minutes. And then you get to the bottom and it's like, yeah. So if you're looking at that from the frame of instant gratification, instant business success, you'd be like, oh, you just woke up in the morning and you crushed that race today. No, you've been doing that work for 10 years. Nobody saw the grit and the tears behind the scenes, but they see you in front of the camera that day holding up the medal, right? It's the same in business. No?
Without a doubt. And by the way, I'll kind of talk more about the sports side. I think that's what makes the Olympics so amazing, right? Is just as a spectator sport. And it's very different than the sport I played, right? Football, like it isn't that instantaneous, and you can kind of make mistakes and you have the chance to move on and you always have next week. But, you see people that are in like alpine skiing in the Olympics or gymnastics or whatever it is, or diving. And it's like, the work that they put in over that last 4 years, almost everything they've done on a day in, day out basis is for that moment. And then it's like, they get to that moment and, some of them, they don't succeed, but it's just so magical and spectacular to watch the people that just crush it. It's like the guy that just nails his dive or just hits the perfect run or whatever it is. It's so much fun to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it. I can appreciate it so much. It's amazing. I had one of my buddies on just the other day on the show here, who's an Olympic medalist and a World Cup medalist and stuff. And when we were younger coming up, we were roommates traveling the world, and then he went that way and he did it. And I asked him specifically, I was like, because I wanted to know, I was like, how did it feel like to be at the Olympics standing in the start gate, like being like, I'm here, like I made it. And he was like, it felt like every other race, man. Nothing was any different. And I was like, oh, okay, I got you. Interesting. Yeah. Hey, just another day in the office. Yeah. So when you were transitioning, I guess, out of school and into the entrepreneur space, it sounds like you've done a ton of different things, like a ton, right?
Yeah.
I'm sure there's been ups and downs throughout the way. The entrepreneurial journey is like a roller coaster, right? What are some of the struggles that you faced on your journey that maybe some people who haven't gone on the journey yet should be looking out for?
Yeah, it's a good question. Early in my career, one of the challenges that I faced was trying to just get my foot in the door, really. I was an athlete in college. Although I was self-taught and took a number of classes, I initially had aspirations of potentially going into like the FBI, the CIA. So I was a criminal justice major while I was in school. And, when I graduated, I was ready to like join one of these like super hot tech startups because that's where I wanted to be at that point in my career. But I just didn't have that pedigree really. And it was difficult for me to get my foot in the door. Nobody wanted to hire me on paper. It just didn't look that exciting. So I ultimately had to kind of create my own success. And that's what led to me starting my first company in a lot of ways was I wasn't able to just get hired doing what I wanted to do someplace. So I just had to start doing it on my own. So, in a lot of ways, it was just me making a decision that, I knew what I wanted in life. And nobody was going to really give it to me. So I just had to earn it. I mean, I remember early in my career, like learning business, right? I mean, it was, you're not born with this stuff. And the qualities of football help, but you don't know the ins and outs and how the business world works. I would just buy books and I just go to bookstores and I just read everything I could read about entrepreneurship and business and strategy and leadership and marketing and all these different types of things. And I used to carry a journal with me. And not a journal like to like record my kind of what happened in my day. It was a journal more to just brainstorm. I just open it up, I put headphones in and I would just sit down and I just start writing business ideas and thoughts and how could I do this and what do I want to do? And, I still sometimes go back to those journals. It's so funny to read the things that I was writing, in 2002, 2003. But, I think that, to get back to your specific question, I think it's just taking the first step, man. It's not going to come to you. You got to go out there and get it. And if you look at it as too big of a bite to take, you're going to get overwhelmed and it's going to be paralysis by analysis. Like, go pick up a book and read it. You know, like go on the internet and just do some Google searches and just start reading and go down that rabbit hole. And then it's like one thing leads to another and another. And before you know it, you know, you start to go down this path of whether it's starting your own company or getting into a career that more fits what you're looking to do in your life.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Huge lesson there. Breaking down your goals, like reverse engineering the big outcome. I think a lot of people, they see the big outcome and it's like, holy shit.
Yeah.
How the fuck do I even, what is that? You know? And if you break it down, like, okay, that's 10 years out, 5 years, 1 year, a couple months, a week. Today, like, what's the immediate next action I need to take right this moment? You do it that way, you know, it's a lot easier on the psyche. Hey, and plus you'll actually get it done.
That's right. Yeah. One of my favorite cliches is how do you eat an elephant? You know, it's one bite at a time, right? Like you can't eat the whole thing at once. Like, just go ahead and give it a start. Like, and before you know it, you got a big, you know, chunk out of it, and you kind of work your way to the end of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Make sure you find someone who can help you buy the right fork and knife. So your tools,
Yeah.
all right. So,
Right.
so you have the right
That's right.
tools, and ask another mentor, you know, which elephant tastes the best, right? Someone who's eaten many, many elephants. Like, hey, you know, I know you've eaten lots of elephants. Which one do you prefer? Oh, I like that.
Right.
Oh, I'll go with that one over there. And then you start eating the elephant, right? Cool, man. So, okay, let's talk about, yeah, I love the journaling thing, you know, brainstorming, getting your thoughts on paper. There's something massive to be said, and we could go deep in that rabbit hole. I don't think we will, but we could, into brain dumping and the subconscious mind and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And there's something massive that happens when you actually like verbally diarrhea out of your head onto paper.
Sure.
Crazy, right? It's a crazy thing that happens. And it's like you start writing and all you have a whole page and a whole book of your thoughts, and then you can go back and look at them and actually learn from yourself. Do you ever find that you read your own stuff and you're like, whoa, man, who wrote this? This is awesome.
All the time. I love it. Yeah, I actually surprise myself. I go back and I read stuff and I'm like, wow, you know, like that was a lot more insightful than I think I even realized it was at the time of writing it. You know, it's sometimes it takes that time to step away. And then, you know, sometimes it's interesting too, because there'll be stuff that I wrote, you know, like I said, I'll go back and something I looked at 15 years ago and I'll read it and I'm like, you know, this is still relevant today. You know, this is still something that I subconsciously use almost on a daily basis with my job, whether it's just sort of a principle or, you know, maybe it's a quote that I wrote out of, you know, some book you know, you know, like how to make friends influence people, right? Like one of these like classic business books, some quote or some kind of like passage that I wrote out. I'm just like, this is really good. And I say it all the time, or I use it all the time. And I didn't even remember consciously that that's where I got it from, but then I'll read some journal thing that I put in 15 years ago and I'll see that actually that's where I got that from. I got that from that many years ago, and I'm still using that and I'm still applying that in my daily life, you know, today.
Absolutely. Yeah. You can learn you really can learn a lot from yourself, a lot, right? Because you're never the same human. Like me today is a different person. Tomorrow is a different person. It's literally a different, the cell structure is different. The knowledge is different. The perspective is different. Everything's different. Right.
Yeah.
I had one of my buddies just recently, actually, I was going off on a tangent about something and he was like, hey bro, check this out. And he sent me a video. He's like, here, just watch this before our meeting type thing. And I was like, okay. And then usually he doesn't send me videos to watch before the meeting. It was kind of weird. And I was like, okay, I'll watch that video. I click on it. It's me. It's me from like 6 months ago. And he's like, watch that. And I watched it. And I was like, oh man, I was right there. Yeah, no, forget what I was just saying. That's what we need to do. That thing that I talked about before. Like, yeah, man, it's you already said this one time. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Hey. So yeah, man, in your journey, you mentioned lots of books and reading and obviously personal development, self-development, growth, right? All this kind of stuff over time. You have to be constantly growing. Do you have any resources or books or anything that stand out over your journey that you could recommend?
Oh man. Yeah.
Out of the millions, out of the millions of books there are.
Yeah. You know, one of my favorite books that I've read, and it's a little bit more recent, is The Hard Things About Hard Things. It's by Ben Horowitz, who is, you know, part of Andreessen Horowitz. And it's just a great, like, no BS account of like getting a startup off the ground or making a startup successful. And in the last, how kind of latter part of my career here, I've been into this more turnaround mode where, for whatever reason, and I didn't set this out for myself, but I've been brought into these startups that, have like potential and have a product, but have kind of made a couple missteps along the way, with this opportunity to see how we can turn these companies around and capture new opportunities in the market. And you go into these companies and, they're established and the people are established. And in a lot of cases, you have to make really difficult decisions, right? Like no good option here, but you got to kind of have the courage to make that decision. And now you got to work with your team to get their buy-in and your investors and all these different types of people. And in that book in particular, he talks a lot about just the ridiculous, the hard things about hard things, right? Like the difficult decisions you got to make to be successful. And, it's something I go back to all the time. And when I have to make these kind of almost impossible decisions, it's something that I think about a lot on what he was able to do, because he ultimately was able to be very successful, even though there were times where, it looked so dark that there was just no way they were going to be able to get through this. But, if you kind of put your head down and just don't give up. And like, we said before, just take one step at a time, you find you can get through almost the toughest situation.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. One of the big things, I mean, from my perspective, looking at someone like yourself, who you come into companies, you come into places, and your mission is really to make change, right? Create change. When you're creating change, obviously you're going to get resistance, right?
Mm-hmm.
From all directions. You're going to get employee resistance. You're going to get possibly board resistance, investor
Mm-hmm.
resistance, consumer resistance. Resistance is going to come. Now, that's not a bad thing, but it's going to be there. How do you approach winning over hearts and minds of souls when you're entering this space? How do you approach that? Because that is a task.
That is the best question, because that is probably, whenever I get asked, like, what are some of your biggest failures? I think some of my biggest failures early on was my inability to do that, quite frankly. And earlier in my career as a leader, I think I had this need to come in and quickly demonstrate I could be the smartest guy in the world, right? Or the smartest guy in the room, I should say. Hey, I have all this experience. I have all these ideas. I've looked at your business. This is where you're going wrong. This is where you need to go. Let's go ahead and make some of these shifts. We're going to cut costs here. We're going to reinvest here. We're going to hire here, right? And in a lot of ways, the decisions I was making weren't the wrong decisions. It was the way I was approaching it with my team, because I wasn't winning over hearts and minds. And it doesn't matter if you have the right strategy or the right tactics, or, if you happen to be the smartest person in the room at that particular moment. If your team doesn't want to rally around you, or your newly sort of inherited team doesn't want to rally behind you, you can't be successful. So where I think I've really learned and matured as a leader, and it's made me more successful, is, the first thing you do when you go into a new company and you have to implement change is just listen. Just shut up and listen, and let your employees, let your team come to you. They've been there. They know that things aren't working great, right? Like they're not naive. They know that the company's not in great shape and there's been mistakes and there's missteps. Let them tell you what they are, and take an honest to God, like, interest in what they have to say, and don't try to jump to conclusions, and don't try to jump to solutions. Secondly, never criticize the team personally, because I've made this mistake in the past. It's really easy to go into a company that's is failing or hasn't been successful in a certain way, and start to point things out. And, who made this decision? This was stupid. Why did we do this? Like, whose idea was this? Like, this doesn't make any sense. But the problem is a lot of those employees have taken a lot of pride in the work. And in many cases, the work they've done has actually been really good. And for me to even be there in the first place, obviously the company's done a lot of things right, because there's an investor base that cares about the company. So I've learned that too, respect the team that's in place. Like there's definitely errors, there's definitely changes that need to be made. But the team's probably done a lot of really great things. And I think finally, the biggest thing that you really got to do is never lose track of the human aspect of this, because unfortunately, a lot of times you come in and you have to make changes with personnel, and people are not going to be in the right role, and maybe there's cuts that have to be made, or you're going to bring in new people that are now going to be in leadership roles over where that person was. And if you're not empathetic to the people that you have and are always keeping in mind that these are people who have their own aspirations and their dreams, and their families, their concerns, you're going to lose those people. But if you're able to let those people know that their best interest is what you have in mind as well. So here's the goal. Here's what we need to go, right? Kind of reverse engineering those goals as you talked about. This is what we need to get to. We all agree on that. But I care about you as a person, and we're going to do this together as a team. If you can get them to buy in on that, then you win the hearts and minds. And then it allows you to actually implement that strategy, put those things in place.
Yeah, important. Hey, super important. That's a great point you said about they've been working towards something, and they might have they probably do have massive pride in the work they're doing. And if you come in and just start smashing it, they're going to be like, come on, man, we've been working on that the whole time. Like, I hear what you're saying there. Yeah. That's very impactful. Super good. Now, one thing that I find interesting, there's two ways that you can look at culture, right? You can look at culture from like, cultural perspective, as in geographical, right? So like my wife and I lived and worked in Switzerland, and then we went to Singapore, and then we went to the Philippines, and then to Italy. Those are like 4 very different cultures, right? Ethnicities are different, languages are different, working environments different, corruption levels are different, like everything's different, right? That's one part of culture to understand in business. But then there's also company culture, right? The culture within the organization. So talk to us about the importance of that, because that's something that a lot of people overlook or they don't pay enough attention to. And if you don't, what happens?
Yeah, man, that's a great question. Culture. I mean, look, I'm a big believer in culture. I've been lucky enough to be a part of some companies that have had, I think really great cultures. And some of the, one of the things I'm almost most proud of is when I was at events.com, we were, and it wasn't something that we even solicited. There was kind of an anonymous survey they sent out to our employees, and they asked them to, answer a bunch of questions. And based on the responses, we were awarded Entrepreneur Magazine's top cultures in America for medium-sized businesses. And it was something we took a lot of pride in as a company. So it is very important to me. I think it's everything. I think you nailed it. It's not just sort of, kind of like you said with the different geographic regions. I would look at it like this. And we used to talk a lot about this at events.com. Your strategy and your tactics are what you do. Your culture is how you do it. And you're going to set a direction for your team, and there's things that they need to get accomplished, but the culture is how your team works together and the values that they encompass as a team. So one of the things that's really important to us, and we've, I've had in every single company, is one of the first things I do if I come into a company that doesn't have it, is I establish core values. What do we believe in? What is important to us? Teamwork, integrity, innovation, those types of things. And I think once those things are in place, now you start to measure people by not just the result of what they do, but are they doing things the way that you want your company to be done? And then once you get your company aligned on that culture, it's much easier to make sure that the company goes in the direction you want it to go into. I think the other thing with culture that's really important is in your mind as a CEO or an owner of your own company, you have an idea of who you want to be and how you want to be it. The most important thing is who you hire, who you fire, and who you promote, because that's ultimately going to dictate, and it's going to show the rest of your teammates what type of people are going to be successful in your company. And if you don't have people that are sort of following the core culture that you've set, your company is going to go in a lot of different directions.
Oh yeah, that's a good call. That's a good call. It's the definition of leading by example.
That's right.
Right? Who you fire, who you hire, and who you promote is leading by example. This is the shining light. This is the person. But if you start promoting and doing people that are outside of the culture, outside of the mold, it confuses everybody. Right? Is that what you're saying? Yeah. It's interesting. That's very smart, actually. Yeah. Makes me think a little bit. Yeah. Very good. Very good. So let's talk a bit about, we were having a bit of fun before we hopped on talking about domains and how they're funny because when you have a business idea or like, you know, you have that aha moment laying in bed at like 4 a.m, you just wake up and you're like, oh, wow, that's a great idea. Wait, hold on. This is what I do. Is that domain available? I'm going to buy it. So you're a man of amazing domains. Like you have some, I don't want to say them because I don't know which ones you're using or not, but you have some really cool domains if you want to share.
Yeah.
What's up with that? Like, how do you get these domains? Because those are not easy to get, I don't think. Right. Yeah.
I wish I could take credit for, so yeah, I was the COO of events.com, which is a phenomenal domain.
Crazy.
And really, really interesting, cool company. Obviously it's a very tough time to be in the event space. So we were a ticketing and event management technology platform and are a technology platform. But that was interesting. That was, and like I said, I can't take credit for it. The founder of that company, a gentleman by the name of Mitch Thrower, who's a great entrepreneur, has founded a number of other companies, was able to acquire that company from CBS, believe it or not, in kind of a weird fire sale. He knew a guy. They were short on their quarterly numbers. Called his friend up. He was like, "Hey man," he was like, "What's it going to take for me to get that?" And he was able to make that deal happen for a nominal amount of money. So that was great. And then now I'm the CEO of a company called Fancy.com. Which fits what we do perfectly. But well, you know, once again, you know, I didn't acquire that domain. That was here. As I mentioned, I was brought in, you know, recently at Fancy to kind of drive and lead the turnaround here. So I can't take credit for it, but it is kind of funny that I end up at these companies with these great one-word domains that, you know, I build this company around. But I'm the same as you. I always have these interesting business ideas and different things. And you know, if you went into my GoDaddy account, I probably got 30 or 40 domains too that totally. You know, I'm thinking about one day I'm going to do something with this.
Yeah, me too, man. My GoDaddy is ridiculous. I always joke with my partners and my friends and my wife even. I'm like, Jesus, I pay GoDaddy more than I pay anybody else. And you're just keep renewing these domains. I'm like, do you want to renew it 2 more years? I'm like, oh yeah, for sure. That's going to be something. I don't want anybody to get that one. That's a good one. Yeah, it's a good one. Yeah, it's funny. It's funny. So throughout your journey, man, because you've been on the journey of journeys and you're doing cool shit, which is fun. Yeah. It's fun shit. It's cool shit. It's diverse, but it's also extremely impactful, very much needed, and very cool. Is there a transformation that's happened personally? I mean, I see behind you, I don't know if this is your stuff, but I see like a video game thing. I see guitars. You seem like a pretty cool dude. Like, you know, I'd want to hang out at your house. It looks pretty fun there. Yeah, man. Right. Have you had like a personal transformation in the entrepreneurial journey or the business journey that possibly in hindsight you can see that happened in yourself, but maybe you didn't expect?
Yeah, you know, that's interesting question. Yeah, I mean, without a doubt, I've evolved. But you know, it's like, yeah, you look behind me and there's the guitars, and probably in another room you don't see it. I got like a little art studio set up where I do paintings, and then I got, you know, like, so we have our home office. I got a bar that I built, so I do like kind of woodwork and stuff like that. It's interesting. It's gotten me in a lot of trouble in life, but I am easily bored and can become like non-complacent very quickly, which, like I said, it hasn't been great. Like at school, you know, obviously, like I'd probably be a better student if I had a little bit more of attention span. But I guess that desire to always want to try new things and to kind of like experiment with new things, like, oh, I want to pick up the guitar now, or hey, I want to teach myself how to paint now, or hey, I want to take on this project, is probably what's allowed me to do what I've been able to do professionally. Because really what I've done is I've constantly had this desire to take on new challenges. And for me to take those challenges on, there had to be personal improvement, right? So, you know, I talked about it, all reading all those books and the journaling that I did really, really early in my career before I founded a company. And then, you know, when I founded that company, there were a lot of things about business that I just didn't know. And that led me to go back to business school. So I went back and got my MBA. And then in business school is ultimately where I built the network that led to me coming on at events.com as the COO. And then relationships as the COO of events.com gave me the opportunity to take on a company like Fancy, where they needed a new CEO to come on the company, right? And I think a lot of that is my own curiosity, but it's also my own desire to try new things and not being afraid to take on new challenges. So I think you see it a little bit personally around me. But I think that quality or that trait that makes me do dumb stuff, like buy guitars and try to teach myself how to play it, has also served me really well professionally, because it's allowed me to kind of move up my career and not do what a lot of people do, which by the way, there's nothing wrong with it. But I'm not the kind of person that could sit in middle management for 15 years doing the same job. It's just not who I am.
Yeah, absolutely. I hear that. I think the biggest takeaway there from that, what I get is, you're not afraid of failure. You're not afraid of taking chances, right?
Yeah.
You're not afraid of getting us outside of your bubble and doing something that you're probably going to fail at it the first few times, right? You're not going to be a Mozart the first time you paint something, but you grab the paint stuff and you're getting after it, right? You grab the guitar, you start strumming that damn guitar over some time.
Yeah.
You're gonna be better at it, right? It's the entrepreneurial mindset, but it's also a personal thing where people unfortunately get into a safe space bubble and they just allow their subconscious mind to control them and keep them safe. Where really they want to get out there and do some stuff, but they just simply can't break out of their subconscious trap that their monkey mind is trying to keep them safe, right?
So true.
It's very obvious when people have broken out of that, and to me it's very obvious. You obviously have. It's beyond obvious, and it serves you well, right? So for the listeners out there who maybe are thinking like, I would love to play guitar, but like I can't do it, or I would love to start a business, that sounds fun. I have a domain idea, I want to start a business too, but like, what about my job? What if I lose my job? And they have fear. They're operating from a place of fear. My only thing to say to that is, there's no way you'll know what you were placed on the earth to do or what your actual superpower is unless you experiment and try things. And you put yourself out there vulnerable enough, and you can accept the fact that you won't be perfect your first try. Nobody is.
That's right.
Right? So
yeah, there's a famous I think it's a Mark Twain quote, and I'll butcher it, so I'll just paraphrase it, but it says something to the extent of like, at the end of your life, you're going to be much more regretful for the things that you didn't do versus the things you tried and failed. And that's something I think about a lot. Like, hey, look, what's the worst that can happen? Like, go do that thing, go try it, even if it's an uncomfortable situation, or even if you don't, if I go to this thing, like, do I really want to go? And it's like, when was the last time you regretted doing something new, or taking on a new adventure, or trying something you've never tried before? You never regret that stuff. You regret not doing it.
Yeah, you regret not doing it. Exactly. It's so true. It's so true. Yeah, the easiest way, I think, for people to understand that in a very simple fashion is just to relate it to going to the gym. For me, it's very like, everybody's like, I don't want to go. I don't want. When was the last time you forced yourself to exercise, go for a hike, go for a walk, go for a run, go to yoga, go lift weights, whatever your thing is? When was the last time you forced yourself to do that and came home and you were like, well, that was terrible. Can't believe I did that. I hated that. You never, ever, ever. Like, you always are so happy about that experience, and you're so grateful that you made the decision to do it. It's exactly the same in just everyday experiences, like learning how to play guitar, learning how to do woodwork, which, by the way, I also love woodwork, which is very cool. Going back to school and understanding that maybe you want to level up your business game. Okay, I'm going to go get an MBA. Side note, I did the exact same thing. I went back to school and got an MBA. It's the same thing. When you realize you want to make changes or adjust or level up, just do it. Literally, Nike, just do it. Like, they have the best tagline of all time, right?
That's right, 100%. And to your point, like going to the gym, sometimes all you need to do is motivate to get to the front door of the gym, right? Like, once you walk through the door of the gym, the workout sort of takes care of itself, right? Like, your mind is telling you don't want to go, you're lazy, you'll come up with 1,000 excuses. But if you can get yourself through the front door of that gym or to that yoga class or whatever you want to do, you'll find out you'll probably end up having a great workout. And I think that that's the same with anything else, right? It's like, you just got to take that first step, and then sort of the next step, and then the next step. And don't think about like the entirety of your entire workout and how tired you're going to be and how many sets you're going to be. Just get yourself to the gym and walk through the front door, and then worry about the next thing that comes from there.
Powerful. Just like in an entrepreneurial journey, don't think of the 10-year like, oh, and then I'm going to sell it and go public. And like it's like, well, wait a minute. What's the name?
Yeah.
What industry are we in? You know, like, just start.
Go, go get the domain name from GoDaddy.
Go to GoDaddy and get the domain name. Write in the journal a bunch of thoughts. You know, take the first
Right.
step. Right, take the first step. Cool, man. Well, Greg, you know, it's been a pleasure chatting with you, man. We have a lot in common, and it's very cool. For the viewers and the listeners out there who are interested to learn more about you, check you out, where can they come find you?
Yeah, I mean, come check out Fancy. That's the name of the company. We're doing a lot of really cool and interesting stuff. It's a social marketplace. We're really all about just finding the most interesting, cool lifestyle products from like emerging brands and artisans across the globe. A lot of the e-commerce sites out there are great if you know exactly what you want to do. Fancy is a place where if you're looking to discover just really neat, interesting stuff that you probably didn't know existed, and have some fun following some different people. Like, you talked about some of our investors. Those are also users of the platform. Drake and all these different guys have public profiles and things that they've liked, that they fancied in the past. Check that out. And, me, if you want to follow me on Twitter, Greg_Spillane, LinkedIn, friend request me. Let's connect. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And for those of you who have not been paying attention, it's fancy.com because it's an awesome domain.
Right.
Right. That's awesome. Cool, man. Well, all that's in the show notes. Go find Greg and Fancy and everything that he's doing. It's cool. Thanks so much for being on the Growth Podcast, man. I appreciate your time.
Thanks, Aaron. Appreciate it, man.